Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to go through 3 highly effective tips to help you improve your posture. Now these tips are really important tips. They cover 3 aspects of sort of regaining good posture and good positioning that are simple to do but work really well. And we go through this a lot clinically, but they're things that hopefully you guys can benefit from if you hang around to the end and watch it all through. So I guess the interesting thing about these 3 tips is they're different from some of the traditional things that we talk about. So if you're anyone who's ever considered or have tried a postural brace, those postural shirts, any form of taping, things like that, those exoskeletons or those external devices to help your posture. Now there's certainly a role for them in this conversation, but it's a very small role, because what we find is that putting yourself in a brace or putting yourself in a device that pulls your shoulders back is absolutely a good option for people who need to force themselves in a good position to help decrease some sinister pain, some discomfort. Maybe it helps you sleep better. Anything that you can do to manage those symptoms, you have to do. And that can include things like those external braces. But what's really important to understand about the braces is they don't fix anything. Yes, they put you in a better position. If you keep it there for long enough, it may start to undo some of the dysfunction that's created from being in a bad position. But the problem with those devices is it doesn't rewire your brain and nervous system to keep you there. So when those braces come off, then it's very easy to default back into the position that led you down that path of dysfunction in the first place. So while they can be a very good stopgap, short-term solution, not bad-mouthing them at all, there's definitely a role for them if they're used in the right context. But we have to have conversations that work around the outskirts of that so that you don't need to wear them anymore. And I guess the problem with a lot of postural stuff is posture's boring, it's unsexy, it's not the most interesting of conversations, and it takes conscious effort. And when we're trying to relax and we're trying to take the weight off our feet and we default into a bad shape, we do so because we're looking to relax and we're not looking to be in an active position, which is sort of what we need to do sometimes to foster good shape. So again, by the end of this video, hopefully you've got 3 really simple ideas that you can put into place that will help you go from someone who is sort of more rounded shouldered, maybe your neck, your chin points out a little bit, to someone who feels more comfortable being in a better position. So let's get to it. So the first thing I think, which is often missed with trying to reclaim good posture, is that in the process of getting from a really good position where you're up tall, shoulders back, into a slouchy posture, or a posture where our shoulders are rounded forwards, the consistent weight of gravity pulling our structures down, and we're hanging off the passive tension of those structures to find that comfort. What it does over time is it asks all that tissue in the back of the shoulders and the upper back to stiffen and tighten to support that position. And then one of the things that's missed a lot is that when we're trying to get out of a rounded shape back into a shoulders back position, we actually have to go through and go past that stiffness. So for a lot of people, it's not as simple as going pull your shoulders back, because you're actually butting up against a whole bunch of stiffness you've accrued from getting into that shape in the first place. So one of the things that is really, really helpful to make it easier for you to go from a rounded, slouchy posture to a more square shoulders back position is to take a ball or a set of balls and put it into your upper back and use the ball to free up that stiffness so that you can clear a path for those shoulder blades to travel back together. And we've gone through this before, so this is just 2 lacrosse balls taped together, and this is just the one. So for the purposes of this, we use the peanut one. And all we want to do here is we want to place the peanuts in between the shoulder blades, and you'll find the bump of your spine will sort of sit in the little divot here, and the balls will press into either side of the joints of your spine. So how that looks, hopefully the camera picks this up, is that we're going to lie down on top of that, and if you can cross your arms across your chest, it pulls your shoulder blades out the way. And we just want to get the ball and move it up and down until we find a spot that feels stiff. So again, we're not rolling up and down because it doesn't necessarily give us enough specific pressures through the joints to make a difference. But we want to find a spot that feels stiff, and we want to stay here. If this is quite painful for you, then obviously take your time, make sure you're gentle. The other thing that we can add to this is we can use movement with your arms to free up that stiffness. So if you come up a little bit higher and maybe a little bit further out to the shoulder blade, and you find that it's a little bit stiff, if you can lift your arm up and raise it above your head, we can use movement to shear free some of that stiffness at the back. And then what we can find is, once you've cleared a lot of that stiffness in the upper back, all of a sudden you've cleared a path for those shoulders to feel like they can go back easier. And as I said before, it's an aspect of reclaiming good posture that doesn't get focused on enough. We're often talking about strength exercises, which we'll get to. We're talking about ergonomics and a lot of those other things to help you get into a better position, but we often neglect to go after the stiffness in the upper back and the muscular tightness in the upper back that stops you from being able to draw your shoulders back. So one of the things I urge you to do is give this exercise a go, and you'll see straight away how much easier it is to pull your shoulders back. And it takes away some of that burden of having to force yourself into a better position all the time and trying to do that through stiffness. If you take that stiffness off, then it's easier to put those shoulders back into a better shape. So that's the first tip, using your ball to free up that stiffness, clear a path so that those shoulders can get back into a better shape. Now the second thing, and you can do this a number of ways. Now this is just a power band. You can get it from any sporting goods store. Amazon's a big one. Similar to TheraBands, where you can tie some TheraBands, and all we want you to do here is we want to do a rowing exercise. So the key obviously is taking your shoulders from a rounded, sort of protracted shoulder blade position to one where you're pulling your shoulders back as well. Now, the important thing to notice with bad posture or less than perfect positions is not only do the shoulders often roll forwards, but we often dump through our mid-back to low back at the same time. So good posture doesn't require you just to pull your shoulders back. It actually requires you to be up taller as well. So you can't have one without the other. So you can certainly go from this position and straighten yourself up into a better position, but then you have to pull those shoulders back to respect the anatomy of the area. So the reason why I said that is when you're doing this rowing exercise, and again, you can use any resistance that you like, you need to make sure that you're up nice and tall. So not poking your chest out, but imagine that you're being pulled straight up, and all you're doing with this exercise is pulling the band towards you and trying to make sure that you're squeezing your shoulder blades together. Again, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's an exercise you've probably seen before, but one of the key differences that I think is really important for postural exercises is we want to train your musculature for endurance as well as strength. So if you're doing the standard, 3 sets of 10 or 3 sets of 8, you're certainly going to be affecting a change in the strength of that tissue. But generally posture falls down because it's a game of endurance, where a lot of people can have the best intentions, they'll sit up nice and tall, but then half an hour later they start to lose that endurance and they start to go looking for something to rest on, which is often the passive tension of those tissues, which makes it stiff, puts it in a bad position, sets us up for dysfunction. So the tweak that I want to put on this with this exercise is when you're pulling this towards you, making sure that your elbows are by your sides, your elbows don't flare out when they're close by. We want to make sure that you're doing 15, 20, 25, 30. We want insane amounts of fatigue when you're doing this, and we want to do a couple of sets of that. So we want to start to train your muscles to get used to being in that position for a while and having the endurance to hold you there in the face of other people who might start to dump down once they start to fatigue. So exercise number 2. So we want to make sure that we free up the upper back to clear a path for your shoulders to be able to get back and stay back in a better position. We want to increase the endurance of the muscles in your shoulder blades so you can stay there more effectively for longer. So they're the 2, I guess, main exercises to focus on: mobility and strength. Makes sense. So now the third one, and believe it or not, this is actually the most important one. It's where a lot of people fall down. It's the reason why people can't click their fingers and have great posture forever. If you have a bad pair of shoes, you can change your shoes. You don't have to worry about it again. If you're weak somewhere, you can get it stronger, and then it should stay that way as long as your mechanics are good. But the thing with posture is that you have to have a good awareness of your posture at all times. So the third tip is that you have to have that awareness, because if you don't, as I said before, you can sit down at your laptop in the best position and you can say to yourself, I have great posture because I'm in this position and I can get into a great position. But once our brain and our focus goes onto something else, the real challenge is then what happens to your body over time. And what we see for a lot of people is at some point, they'll go looking for that stability and that passive tension so that they can continue to focus on what they're doing. And then without realizing it, they've been in this position for half an hour or 2 hours without actually having taken a moment to stop, assess where they're at, readjust, and then go again. So the awareness of your positioning is crucial. And what we want to do here is we want to talk about it in the context of everyday activities, and it's stationary activities. So it doesn't have to be sitting, although sitting is probably the most common scenario where people fall down and stay in a bad position and foster all these habits. But it generally comes back to the things that you do most throughout the day. So for someone who stands all day, maybe you're a chef or you cook a lot, of course you're not going to be sitting down in a poor shape, but there's no reason to suggest that you couldn't be leaning over in that same poor position if the bench is a little bit too low, or if you're someone who works at a register and you're always sort of reaching down, or you're cleaning and you're in this position all the time. So we want to give you a sense of what a good position feels like, and then measure everything that you do back up against that position, whether it's sitting based or not, so that you can keep checking in and saying, look, am I still in a good position, yes or no? If I'm not, what can I do to make that easier for me so I don't have to force myself into this position all the time? So the important thing to talk about here is to find your best posture. Essentially what I'll get you to do is, if you can stand up, but for the purposes of this I'll be kneeling so you can see me, most people stand in a good position. There aren't too many people that, when we go from a slouching posture like this, if I keep everything in the same shape and then try and sort of stand up, there aren't too many people that stand in this position. Most people sort of default back to a decent shape where it's easy to get into this position. So what I often say to most people is, get into a really nice standing position, and just by taking your shoulders comfortably back. Don't do the shoulders back and down, because the problem with that is that when we fall into a bad shape, we're often dropping our shoulders down and rolling forwards. And that's just sort of with the slope of gravity. So what we need to do is we essentially need to take your shoulders back and hold them up a fraction. So we're not going all the way up. You just want to take your shoulders back and make sure you're supporting that weight. And this base position defines every shape that you want to be in when you're in a stationary position. So obviously, as soon as you use a computer or a laptop, all that should change is that you bend your elbows and that your keyboard and mouse are here. Your screen supports this position. Your chair holds you in this position. So if you find that you sit into a chair and all of a sudden you go hunting for the back of that chair, it's up to you to fill that gap with something other than your back. Fill it with a rolled up towel, a cushion, something that holds you in a good position so you don't have to do it yourself consistently. And taking this shape, you then need to reassess and just catch yourself in the moment. So as I said way back at the start of the video, if you've clicked through and are watching this, then you've taken that first step. You're at least interested enough that you know that posture is something that might be worthwhile for you to address. And that's the first step that everyone has to get to. You have to get to a point where you value that this position is important and you understand that this position is hazardous for a lot of different reasons. But you need to, I guess, come to that realization and place a value and make that important to you, because if you don't, it's not going to change on its own, and you can't strengthen your way out of it, you can't mobilize your way out of it, you can't brace your way out of it, because if you still get back into these bad shapes, your body's consistently going to get stiffer and weaker and tighter over and over and over again. So one of the things that we see with our really good athletes is you can have the best, strongest, most flexible athletes in the world, and they're amazing in the 1 or 2 hours a day that they're being athletic. And then as soon as you put them back into regular life, they'll sit on the couch, they have to transfer themselves to and from the practice, they still know what a plane feels like, they still know what a couch feels like. They might be playing Fortnite at the moment, they might be doing something where they're in a bad shape. And all of that strength and conditioning counts a little bit, but not a lot, because you're not using any of it. So you might find that your tissue tolerance gets better as you get stronger, but you're still asking it to be dysfunctional by putting it in a bad position. So we need to make sure that you're undoing the consequences of that by getting yourself stronger, getting yourself looser in the right areas. But if you don't buy into the idea that you need to constantly check in with yourself to see where you're at, then you can't fix this and get to a good posture indefinitely. So I think that's really important to touch on. So it's not necessarily an exercise, but you've got to have that value proposition in your head. It has to make sense to you, and you have to just check in every now and again, because what happens is once you can recognize and realize the moments when you've been in a bad shape, you might find, or you should find, or at least we do clinically, you'll start to pick up on those little hidden cues that lead to you being sore. So if you wake up stiff and sore in the neck one day and you think, gee, what did I do? I must have slept funny, something must have gone wrong. But if you're paying attention to your posture, you may realize that the day before or the night before, you may have been sitting up in bed for an hour and a half, you know, just in a great Twitter conversation with someone or just watching something on your phone, and you were putting your neck in a bad position. And if you weren't valuing the positions previously, you're never going to know that you're in a bad shape. So you go to bed, everything's fine, you wake up and you've got a sore neck, and it's mysterious because you didn't realize that you're putting it in a bad position. So it's really important to pick up on those cues so that you can then start to understand why your body's reacting the way it is. So it's such a powerful thing to be able to do. And it's something that, again, something that we just don't place enough importance on because posture is not that interesting. So at least it is for me, but I wouldn't expect anyone else to care too much about it, but we need to. So hopefully that's useful. Again, you've got to loosen that upper back. You've got to get some endurance into those muscles. Core strength helps as well. But you've got to care about your posture. You've got to put an importance on trying to pick up on how your posture is and take steps to make that easier for you. Change your ergonomics, jam things into certain places so you don't have to hold yourself there. You're just kept in a better position. And then link those shapes to the dysfunction that you're feeling day to day. It's a really important way to go about things, really helpful at the end of the day. So hopefully that was useful. Please let me know in the comments if there's anything that you want addressed in terms of posture. I'm a nerd. I'll keep replying to every comment in the comment section. If you went on to enjoy the video, if you found it useful, please consider leaving a like. And if you do like this kind of content, it's coming out regularly, so please consider subscribing just so that you're notified of when it comes out. Because we want to make sure that we're giving you information that works, that's current, and that we talk about every day in the clinic, because there's far too much information out there that doesn't really survive the litmus test. So again, hopefully that was helpful, and then we'll see you in the next one. Bye.